I thought the flashing light on my roof was a joke, until I got the fine. Not just any fine, $275 for an unauthorized electrical fixture. And the best part? I didn't even install it. It was a normal Tuesday morning, sun barely up, coffee barely hot, when I stepped outside to grab the mail and caught something glinting off the corner of my garage roof. At first I thought it was dew. Then I looked closer. There, bolted into my shingles like it owned the place, was a sleek black, motion-activated security floodlight, aimed squarely at the sidewalk. I froze. My heart hiccuped, because I hadn't hired anyone. My wife hadn't either. We'd had no workers, no roofers, no contractors. And yet, there it was, installed, wired, blinking like it was proud of itself. I didn't laugh. Not yet. That came when I saw the envelope. Taped, not mailed, taped to my welcome mat. Cream-colored. Standard HOA formatting. The same passive-aggressive font I'd come to associate with inflated fines and fabricated infractions. Violation notice, it read. Unauthorized exterior fixture in violation of Section 7B. Fine assessed, $275. Due in 10 business days. But the kicker? On the back, someone had scribbled in pen. HOA installed fixture under neighborhood safety pilot. Homeowner still responsible for compliance. I read it 3 times, then a 4th. My first thought? This had to be a prank. My second? It wasn't. So I did what any confused, mildly panicked homeowner would do. I called the HOA. Straight to voicemail. Due to high call volumes, your concern may be addressed at the next general meeting. Translation. You're on your own. And that's when the confusion cracked open into rage. They had trespassed on my property, installed hardware without consent, and now they were demanding money for it? I didn't wait. I stormed over to Dave's place, our newly elected HOA board member who'd helped dethrone Karen, the former HOA president turned tyrant after the infamous library bench scandal. He opened his door and saw the paper in my hand. His face fell. Oh man, he sighed. You too? You too? I echoed. Dave brought me into his garage. On his corkboard, 3 nearly identical notices were pinned. One addressed to him, one to the house next door, and one to a vacant property. Vacant. They were finding empty homes now. They're calling it a neighborhood safety enhancement, Dave said, rubbing his temples, claiming discretionary installation rights under something called Ordinance 14A. Which is not in any of the published bylaws. I stared at him. Why would they do this? Best guess, he said. Someone on the board has a relative in the home security business. They get paid to install floodlights under the HOA's safety umbrella. And the residents? We get the bill. I wanted to scream. Or laugh. Or both. But mostly I wanted to fight back. Is there any way to stop it? I asked. Dave nodded. We'll need proof, and if they did this without board approval, especially if they used forged documents, we might be looking at fraud. Fraud. The word landed in my chest like a stone. That night, I sat by the window with a notepad in hand, staring at that light. It flickered on at 3:17 a.m. Then again, and again. Birds, leaves, shadows. The sensor was way too sensitive, but something was off. When I checked my fuse panel, I found a new cable running from the light into a small black box. It wasn't just a light, it was a surveillance system. I traced the cable from the box, through the soffit, down into the flower bed, and out toward a public utility pole. Where it led from there, I couldn't tell. But I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't safety. It was spying. And that fine, it was just the beginning. That same night, I did something petty. I climbed back onto my roof, pulled a roll of cardboard from the garage, and taped a big, ugly flap right over the motion sensor. For 5 minutes, nothing happened. Then my phone buzzed. It wasn't from the HOA board, not from a city office, not even from Dave. It was from a Gmail address. Subject line: tampering notice, immediate action required. Body text: covering or altering installed safety devices is considered a Tier 2 violation under HOA Pilot Policy 14A. Failure to comply may result in daily escalating penalties. And the sender? KarenL.Whitmore, 1981@gmail.com. My blood ran cold. Karen. Again. She wasn't even on the board anymore. She had been removed, publicly, replaced. But somehow, she was still operating in the background, enforcing rules she no longer had the authority to create, using her old email tone, her classic formatting, her favorite veiled threats. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I called Dave. "You're not going to believe this," I said. He groaned before I even finished. "It's Karen, isn't it?" I forwarded him the email. He didn't laugh. He didn't even curse. He just said, "I thought she was done." Guess not. And that's when things shifted from absurd to serious. Because this wasn't just an unauthorized fixture or a wrongly issued fine. It was a manipulation campaign, a surveillance operation. And Karen, despite being officially ousted, was still pulling strings. Dave called for an emergency HOA meeting. Officially noticed, documented. No shady backyard votes. No private ambushes. Just a real public meeting. But I wasn't waiting for that. The next afternoon, I climbed the roof again. This time with gloves, a flashlight, and a plan. I examined the device more carefully. That's when I noticed the sticker I'd missed earlier. Small, silver, almost invisible unless you knew to look. Sentry Pro Secure Solutions. I took a picture, Googled it. The company's website looked standard enough. Corporate surveillance, HOA safety programs, real-time compliance tracking. But something in the About Us section made my jaw tighten. Board of Directors, Brett Whitmore, Karen's nephew. It all clicked. Karen had found a way back into power. Not through the HOA, but through contracts, vendors, and backdoor surveillance. She'd convinced, or corrupted, someone into using her nephew's company to install monitoring equipment across the neighborhood. Then, billed residents for it. Then enforced it through fake ordinances and empty threats. She hadn't lost control. She just changed the method. I called the company. Pretended to be someone interested in their services. The rep on the line was chipper. "Absolutely. Willow Bend's been a great pilot neighborhood for us. We're testing real-time enforcement automation and behavioral feedback tools. Very progressive setup." Behavioral feedback tools? What the hell was this? I thanked him, hung up, and sat down on the curb in front of my house. Staring up at that motion light, I realized just how deep this went. This wasn't just HOA madness anymore. This was something bigger, something designed to control, not protect. Later that night, the meeting began. People were quiet at first, confused, anxious. Dave opened the floor and motioned for me to speak. So I did. I laid it all out. Photos, emails, company connections, vendor ties, the Gmail, the roof wiring, the surveillance net they were unknowingly trapped in. And then I asked the room one question. Did any of you approve a device being mounted to your roof? No hands, just silence. Until someone finally muttered, "I thought my wife did it." Another neighbor chimed in. "We thought it came from the city." And that's when the anger started to boil. People realized they hadn't just been watched. They'd been manipulated. By someone they thought was gone. By someone they had removed. Dave stood, his face unreadable. "I move for a vote. Effective immediately. Suspend all enforcement tied to the so-called security pilot. Open an investigation into the contract. And begin a full audit of any documents connected to former President Karen Whitmore." Every hand went up, unanimous. But as the meeting ended, one woman stood up and asked a final question. "If she's not on the board, how did she get access to our rooftops in the first place?" Dave glanced toward me, then looked down at the file in his hands. "We'll find out," he said quietly. And I believed him. Because what started with a single floodlight was just the surface. Karen hadn't disappeared. She had dug herself back in. And this time, we were ready to pull her out. We thought the surveillance stopped at floodlights. We were wrong. Dave pulled the HOA maintenance log the next morning. thinking it would just be a list of landscaper visits, hedge complaints, and fence height disputes. Instead, he found something else entirely. Line after line marked with phrases like noise mitigation pilot or neighborhood safety grant install. Official sounding, bureaucratic, almost boring. Until you realized neither program existed. Not in any vote record, not in any meeting minutes, not in the budget archives. They had no city ties, no public discussion, just one recurring constant. Each install request was tagged as homeowner approved. Except nobody had signed. Rick, the retired Navy guy across the street, hadn't let anyone on his roof since he installed solar in 2009. The Changs said the same. Every neighbor we talked to looked at us like we were joking, until they saw their name in the spreadsheet, marked as consent granted. Some entries had timestamps: 2:27 a.m., 3:11 a.m. Karen had been doing it in the dead of night, using leftover HOA master keys. Still in possession of the old codes, still holding on to access no one had bothered to revoke, because no one thought she'd ever dare to use them again. But she had. Not just for me. Not just for Dave. For everyone. And she'd cloaked it all under fake policies, ghost signatures, and tech nobody asked for. That's when Rick, ever the tactician, spoke up. We need to catch her in the act. The plan wasn't complex. We created bait. I took an old plywood box, spray-painted it matte black, added a red blinking LED I salvaged from an old charger, and mounted it next to the bogus floodlight Karen had placed. A fake upgrade. Something she wouldn't be able to resist. Then, just in case, I added a new sensor of my own, tied to a battery-powered camera system Rick had installed in his military days. Low profile. Motion activated. Silent. Dave monitored from his garage. Rick brought snacks. I sat by the window watching the street. At 2:41 a.m., the motion light flared on. A shadow moved across my lawn. Small frame. Hoodie. Gloved hands. Karen. She scaled my fence like it was her morning workout. No hesitation. No pause. She knew the layout. She climbed the roof using the hatch I'd forgotten she knew about. She moved straight for the fake box. Reached for it. Rick triggered the real lights. She froze mid-step, caught like a sitcom burglar in a dollar store ski mask. And I stepped out, phone in hand, recording. Looking for something? I asked. Karen turned slowly, her sunglasses still on. At night. I'm responding to a noise complaint, she said. Really? I held up the fake box. Because this isn't even plugged in. She blinked, her brain catching up. Her excuse falling apart. Rick joined me. We have footage. You just trespassed. Again. Karen didn't respond. Her jaw twitched. Then, like a cartoon villain without a script, she hissed, an actual hiss, and dropped back onto the fence, vanishing into the shadows. We didn't chase. We didn't need to. We had everything. By noon the next day, Dave had sent the footage and falsified logs to Janice, the same city investigator who handled Karen's previous infractions. Her reply was immediate. This is no longer HOA jurisdiction. It's criminal. Trespassing, forgery, unauthorized surveillance, and the worst part? She didn't even flinch. That week, she walked into the next HOA meeting like nothing had happened. Clipboard in hand, hair perfectly coiled, wearing the President Emeritus pin she refused to give up. She stood at the front of the room and began, I'd like to formally propose that we reinstate the safety program. Dave cut her off. You're not on this board. She didn't blink. You may silence me in this room, she said, but this neighborhood needs structure. And one day, they'll remember who gave it to them. Then she turned and walked out like a stage play villain exiting scene left. But here's the thing. Structure. We already had it. What we didn't want anymore was her. Karen didn't disappear. She doubled down. 2 days after being caught on my roof, she didn't send an apology. She sent a letter. Not from the HOA. From herself. Typed. Cream-colored. Her signature passive-aggressive font. To whom it may concern. Any footage captured on private property without the consent of the subject is a violation of personal rights and may result in legal retaliation. She didn't sign her name, but she didn't have to. Rick called it The reverse Uno letter. But instead of working, it backfired. People were done whispering. They were ready to act. Dave posted the footage on the private community message board. No commentary, no slander, just a single line. This is what's happening. Decide for yourselves. It spread like wildfire. Neighbors who once kept their heads down began talking openly. Front yards became meeting spots. Porch lights stayed on longer. One neighbor added a giant plastic owl with glowing red eyes above their garage and labeled it HOA Certified Watchdog. And then came the real response. The city. Janice, the inspector, showed up again, but this time with backup. 2 officials from the Office of Municipal Infrastructure. Badges, clipboards, evidence bags. They weren't here to chat. They were here to dismantle. It started quietly, snipping wires from planters, unscrewing floodlights from under gutters, removing fake utility boxes from behind trellises. By noon, Karen's entire surveillance web had been unplugged. Some neighbors clapped, others just watched, stunned. Rick handed out cold sodas like it was a 4th of July barbecue. And Karen? She watched from her window. Blinds barely open. Expression unreadable. But that wasn't the end. Because after the teardown, after every unauthorized bolt and bracket had been removed, the city filed a cease and desist. 4 official charges: unauthorized surveillance, falsified HOA records, property boundary violations, abuse of authority under false representation. Karen had 72 hours to respond. She responded with a lawsuit. Against the board. Against the city. Against me. Her claim? Defamation, unlawful intimidation, and orchestrated community harassment. We didn't even flinch. Rick read the filing and muttered, "She's trying to sue Gravity for being unfair." But we treated it seriously. We had to. We hired a neighborhood lawyer, a calm, gray-haired woman named Elise, who read through the case file and said, "This isn't law. This is theater." Still, Karen forced our hand. We responded with everything we had: the footage, the false logs, the HOA bylaws, the anonymous threats typed in her favorite serif font. Elise compiled it all into a single 90-page response. And then, something incredible happened. The neighborhood rose. Lawn signs appeared. Privacy is not a privilege. We don't spy on neighbors. This home is a surveillance-free zone. Even the Changs, quiet, non-confrontational, set up a lawn gnome holding a fake camera with a sign taped to its belly. Nice try, Karen. Karen never showed up for the preliminary hearing. Her attorney withdrew, and 3 weeks later, the judge dismissed the lawsuit entirely. But that wasn't the moment of victory. That came later. When Janice and her team returned, not to investigate, not to warn, to enforce. They brought new locks for every HOA key box, recoded the master keys, removed Karen's name from every form, login, and mailing list tied to the association. And then, we voted. A new clause was added to the HOA charter. No individual may hold or exercise executive authority without a public vote and the consent of a resident-led ethics committee. It passed unanimously. Karen's kingdom? Officially gone. Her clipboard? Symbolically burned during Rick's Gnome Watch cookout. That night, music echoed through the cul-de-sac. Lawn chairs lined the sidewalks. Kids ran through sprinkler arcs, while parents sipped lemonade that tasted sweeter than it probably was. And in the center of it all, a single sign taped to the community board. We don't report each other. We talk to each other. Karen watched from behind her curtain. But this time, nobody looked back. It started with silence. No more emails, no warnings, no signs on mailboxes. It was almost eerie, like the eye of a storm that had raged for too long. Karen's house turned into a relic overnight. Curtains drawn, porch empty. The once immaculate lawn beginning to fray at the edges. No movement. No muttered complaints. No sideways glances from her window. But no one believed it was over. Because people like Karen don't vanish. They recede. And sure enough, it came back. Not with a bang. but with paper. One foggy Thursday morning, Dave found it tucked under his windshield wiper. A cream-colored envelope, no return address, no stamps. Just his name typed across the front in that same mechanical font we'd all come to dread. Inside? A note. "I warned you what happens when order breaks. You've turned this place into chaos. Enjoy it, while you can." No signature. But it didn't need one. Dave called me. Then Rick. Then the Changs. We checked our driveways. 8 of us had received the same letter. Same font. Same paper. Same venom. We called them the ghost letters. A last-ditch whisper from a woman who once ruled the neighborhood by fear and now haunted it by ink. We reported them to the city. No prints, no security cam footage, nothing. Karen had learned. She no longer needed bylaws or surveillance cameras, just fear and anonymity. For a day or two it worked. People kept their porch lights on a little later. Some brought their lawn decor inside. One neighbor even removed their little free library out of caution. But Rick had a better idea. "Let's give her a parade," he said. I blinked. What? Not for her. Because of her. "You want to kill a ghost? Flood it with sunlight? Let's throw a party so loud, so bright, she has to sit behind that curtain and watch us laugh." It was absurd. It was petty. It was perfect. We called it the Freedom from Fear Block Party. Permits were filed. Flyers were printed. Food trucks were booked. Even the city RSVP'd with a booth on community rights and HOA transparency. Neighbors pitched in. Kids made decorations. The Chang's youngest created a lawn wagon filled with glitter-covered garden gnomes and toilet paper rolls printed with fake bylaws. It became the centerpiece. The gnome float. And yes, we rolled it right past Karen's house. She didn't come outside. But her curtain shifted. She watched. And this time, nobody waved. Nobody flinched. We danced. We sang. We celebrated not just her downfall, but the rise of something better. And when the music died down, when the food trucks left and the paper lanterns were taken down, I walked home and noticed something new. Karen's porch had been swept. The HOA warning sign she once nailed proudly to her siding? Gone. In its place? A single flower pot. And next to it a small gnome. Not one of ours. Simpler. Almost quiet. It didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a whisper. A final word in a story that had lost its audience. The next week her house went on the market. No open house, no realtor sign. Just a piece of paper taped to the door. For sale by owner. Inquire by mail only. She didn't speak to anyone. Didn't say goodbye. Just faded like the last echo of a storm we never wanted, and now would never forget. The block didn't cheer when the moving truck came. We didn't need to. Because we'd already won. The week after Karen's house went up for sale, everything shifted. Subtly, like the quiet turn of a season. Lawn chairs stayed out later. Porch lights twinkled a little longer. Kids rode bikes into the evening without anyone barking at them about helmet compliance or sidewalk width codes. The tension that had gripped Willow Bend like a clenched fist had finally relaxed its hold. Karen's house sat empty. Her curtains never moved again. The porch stayed clean, the HOA plaque never returned, and the gnome, the one she'd placed herself, remained untouched. No one stole it. No one vandalized it. It just sat there, like a silent tombstone for a rain no one missed. But even without her, the damage she left behind was real. Marcy, who lived 2 doors down, still asked for permission before adding flower pots to her steps. The Changs hesitated before repainting their shutters. And one afternoon, Dave caught himself measuring the height of his new wind chime, just in case someone said it was too decorative. That's when we realized something important. Karen was gone. But the fear still lingered. So we did something about it. Dave drafted a new community initiative, Project Reclaim. No bylaws, no enforcement, just encouragement. Neighbors were invited to decorate, personalize, and reclaim their spaces, with humor, color, and heart. Flamingos returned to front yards. Painted birdhouses popped up on fences. One house even installed a tiny wooden bridge over an imaginary stream made of blue marbles. But the centerpiece was the garden gnomes. They multiplied like wildflowers. Each yard chose one. Each had a name. Each wore a custom outfit. Some ridiculous, some regal, some just silly. And then came the final step. We formed a walking trail, the Willow Bend Gnome Walk, complete with a map drawn by the Chang kids and laminated by Rick. Tourists came by. Local news ran a segment. HOA reform groups shared it like gospel. It wasn't a protest anymore. It was a movement, a celebration of personality over policy, of neighbors over enforcers, and of what it means to belong, not obey. That spring, I rebuilt my little free library again. A fresh coat of teal, solar lights on the roof, and carved into the side, a simple phrase, "This is what community looks like." When it opened, the first book left inside was a copy of Charlotte's Web. Inside, a note on the title page, "For whoever needs to remember how to be brave." I didn't expect what came next. A call from the city. It was Sasha, the community coordinator who'd first shown up during Karen's fake surveillance scandal. "We're organizing a regional HOA ethics summit," she said. "And, well, your story is being used as the new blueprint. You gave people something real." At first, I laughed. Me? I just built a box and annoyed a tyrant. But she was serious. "You didn't just resist. You reminded people that a neighborhood is built on connection, not compliance." So I went. A crowded auditorium. Rows of residents, city officials, reform advocates. When I stepped up to the podium, I froze for a second. But then I saw Dave in the front row. Rick beside him. The Changs holding up a cardboard gnome sign. And I began. I didn't speak like a leader. I spoke like a neighbor. I told them about Karen, about the fear, about the floodlights, the fines, the lies. But mostly, I told them about the recovery, the paint, the gnomes, the music, the little acts of rebellion wrapped in kindness. "We didn't fight because Karen was strict," I said. "We fought because she forgot we were neighbors, not subjects. And when we remembered that, we won." The room erupted. And in that applause, I felt something I hadn't in years. Not relief, not pride, but peace. By summer, the story had grown beyond us. Local journalists followed up. A magazine published a piece called The Gnome Rebellion. An HOA reform nonprofit sent us a plaque that Rick hung slightly crooked for irony. Karen never came back. Her house sold quietly. A young couple moved in, planted lavender, hung string lights. No threats, no memos, just brownies delivered to every doorstep with a note. "Thanks for having us. We heard this was a great neighborhood." And it is. Because we made it one. We didn't build a resistance with pitchforks and petitions. We built it with garden gnomes, sunflowers, sidewalk chalk, and overcooked lemonade. With one truth whispered between fences: you're not alone. Karen tried to crush us with fear. But fear doesn't grow roots. Community does. And now, every time I walk past a little free library or see a tiny gnome peeking from under a bush, I smile. Because I know we didn't just win. We rewrote the ending. And this time, we wrote it together.